Welcome back to the Get Off the Treadmill podcast for practice owners and leaders, where we are obsessed with how to build a successful practice and get a life too. Hi, I'm Chuck Blakeman, and we're going to dive into another topic that helps us make more money in less time, get off the treadmill, and rehumanize dentistry by giving everybody their brain back. Today, we're going to talk about the factory system dentistry model versus the participation age dentistry model and the radical differences between the two. When I say factory system, the industrial age gave us the model that we use to manage our practices today. It came out of the factories. So when I talk about the factory system model and factory system dentistry today, that's what I'm talking about. Is the overwhelming majority of practices, and frankly most businesses in America, are run on a model that was developed in the late 1800s. It was a bad idea then, and it's a worse idea now. We want to get involved in participation age dentistry, and I'm going to show you the radical differences between the two today and why you want to run toward participation age dentistry. The hallmarks of their participation age are simply participation and sharing. Practices are discovering that if they invite everyone to participate in the building of a great practice and to share in the rewards, that both the practice and the people profit more. Participation and sharing. It has to be both. I want to participate in building a great practice, and I want to share in the rewards of that as well. When I ask people to participate, that's the fancy word engagement, but without sharing, it's hollow. Because what it really means is I want you to produce more so I can run off with more. The participation age is both participation and sharing. We rehumanize dentistry by giving everybody their brain back. How do we do that? Through distributed decision-making by distributive leadership. The only way that you can make decisions is if you're a leader. We're going to say that everyone in the practice can be a leader. The more input I have in the decision, more ownership I will take in the decision and carrying it out. That's the principle. And the simple principle here is input equals ownership. Therefore, decisions should be made locally whenever possible, and it's almost always possible. Okay, the factory system practice, we all know what it looks like. It's a top-down model, whether there's 8 of you or if it's a practice of 120 locations. There's a top-down model where the people at the top use the people at the bottom to bring benefit to the people at the top. No one would ever say that, but that's the reality of it. The mission-centered model is the participation age model. We want to be mission-centered about the way we do things. We all serve the mission. Whether we founded and own the practice or I work at the front desk, we all serve at the pleasure of the mission. We exist to serve the mission. And the mission is, what is the result that we are going to get for our patients? That's our job. And as a result, we don't serve our departments. We don't serve a human boss. We all serve that mission. And if any one of us sees any of us not serving the mission, we have the right and the responsibility to help get those people back on track. 3 layers of leadership: tactical, strategic, and the people who float in the middle and do both. Those layers of leadership includes everybody in the practice, whether they work at the front desk. Everybody should be working as a leader. And again, we'll talk more about that in a podcast called Leader Leader. We'll detail that out, but it's a very critical piece of distributed decision making. So let's talk about the differences. We've got 7 differences in principle between an old-fashioned factory system dentistry model and where dentistry is going. We've got 7 different principles and 11 different practices and 12 tools that we will use to get there. So we're going to detail those out pretty quickly here, give you a real idea of the radical differences between a factory system dentistry model and the participation age dentistry model. Some of these are going to have podcasts of their own, so I'm going to race through them, but look back for other podcasts that have these titles on them, and you'll see that a lot of them are covered in other podcasts in detail. Number 1 principle, participation and sharing. We just talked about that. That's what a participation age dentistry model looks like. I want and I expect everyone to participate at 100%. I will also share in the rewards of building that great practice. In a factory system dentistry model, it's about revenue and maybe shareholders, depending on how big the practice is. If it's a DSO, it's revenue and shareholders. In participation age dentistry, the second principle is we are mission-centered. We talk not about departments and bosses, but about functions and roles. We don't have an IT department. We have an IT function, and we all work to get that done. Yes, somebody's in charge of that, but we don't guard our fiefdoms and build front desk fiefdoms and hygiene fiefdoms. We're all in this together. we have functions that serve the mission. In the factory system model, it's about departments and about power. I'm keeping my power away from you. That's why front office always has problems with back office. It's like in traditional business, sales and operations. We all hate each other. It's nonsense. It's because we're department-centered and we're boss-centered and we're serving our boss and our department, and nobody is thinking about the mission. Let's get back to serving the mission. That's the second principle involved in this process. The idea here in being mission-centered is that in a mission, we think about center out and edges in. It's not about top down and bottom up. We're all in this together. There are people in the center strategically who might be able to give things to people on the edges of the practice, but it's the people on the edges at the front desk and in the operatories and in those places. Those are the people who are going to feed us the most relevant information about how to run our practice. So it's center out, edges in versus top down, bottom up. The third principle here is leader. And again, we'll talk more about that in another podcast. Distributive leadership. Everybody is a leader. There are no followers. Yes, we all end up following because we choose to follow certain leaders who give us vision. There's 3 people at the front desk and 2 of them are following the third because that person has taken the leadership and they have decided that they want to follow that person. But there are other ways in which they lead as well. And then in the factory system dentistry model, it's all about manager-follower. There's a clear epaulette system where everybody has more bars on their shoulder than the next guy. We all know whose gun is bigger than whose and who can fire whom. And that's a command and control structure versus a distributive leadership structure. Another principal difference, participation age dentistry has stakeholders, self-managed adults who make decisions locally. I like the idea of stakeholders. It's the Old West idea of a bunch of wagons that race off into the plains and they drive a stake into the acreage that they say they want to be theirs. Stakeholders grab a stake and they drive it in and they say, I'm a stakeholder in this practice. We are self-managed adults who make decisions locally. That is what causes them to be stakeholders, is they are actually allowed and required to be adults. In the factory system model of dentistry, it's employees, not stakeholders, but employees. I'm going to call them codependent, childlike people who wait for others to decide. That is codependence. We'll talk more about that in the leader model, but management is nothing more and nothing less than pure unadulterated codependence. I need someone to tell what to do. That's convenient because I need someone to tell me what to do. And then we wonder why people aren't engaged. Stakeholders don't want that and they don't need it. They are self-managed adults who make decisions locally. Next is rehumanized work. The participation in dentistry is rehumanized by one powerful thing: distributed decision making. The more input I have, the more ownership I have. Allow and require me to bring the whole messy creative person to work, and I will be rehumanized, re-energized, and you will have 100% engagement. Let me tell you this, guys. People spend way too much money on this idea of engagement. Engagement is not a process. It's a result. So don't try and get people engaged in your business. It's actually hypocritical because they're going to smell it and say, hey, you want me to work harder so you can run off with more money. Rehumanize the workplace, distribute the decision making, get everybody making decisions locally again with collaboration with strategic leadership, and that will cause them to show up with their full humanity as stakeholders. In the factory system model, it's dehumanized work. Let's dumb it down to the simplest process we can so that we can plug anybody in there as possible. They are simply extensions of machines. They have no brain. They simply act out the same thing. All they have to do is memorize the steps, and it's dehumanized. And then we wonder again why people are disengaged. So participation age dentistry is rehumanized. Factory system dentistry is dehumanized. Another principle, distributed decision-making versus centralized decision-making. You might have seen this as well, but I actually heard a dentist in the last couple of years. He told someone what to do, and when they asked why, the most human of questions, his answer was, because I went to dental school and you didn't. That is not going to engender an engaged person. Centralized decision-making does not birth stakeholders. It births codependent employees who are waiting around to be told what to do. They know that even that if they make decisions, they're going to get in trouble. So I'm just going to wait to be told what to do. And then I get to where I actually like it. I got enough decisions to make it home. I'll come to work, turn my brain off for 8 or 9 hours, and turn my brain back on when I leave. Let's get back to distributed decision making where we have self-managed and self-motivated adults. Another principle is results-based capitalism versus time-based pay. This is a huge tectonic shift. And again, this is not new. Nothing I'm telling you about here is new. It's all stuff that was around before the factory system wrecked it. Before the factory system, I got paid for how many shoes I made, how well I made them, and how happy I made my clients. 3 metrics: quality, quantity, and happiness. That is capitalism. If I made more shoes well and I made my clients happier than the guy down the street, I made more money. We need to return to that model for everybody in our practice. And instead of giving time-based pay because they sat in the chair and we give them a bonus for another 3, 6, or 12 months because they existed, we need to have results-based capitalism where people who are actually killing it make more money than the people who aren't, and encourages everyone to either get up or get out. Those are the 7 principles. Let's get into some of the practices that differentiate participation age dentistry from factory system dentistry. Leadership versus management. I'm going to say this, and I'll say it again in our Leader podcast. Management is a bankrupt industrial age idea. No one needs to be managed, and we'll talk more about that when we define management versus leadership. Everybody needs leadership. Nobody needs management. In a participation age dentistry model, there are 3 circles of leadership: the highly tactical people, the highly strategic people, and people who kind of go back and forth between the two. And it's not about layers, it's about functions. There are up to 12 layers of management in companies. It's just goofy. And the more we mess with that factory system hierarchy, what we call the pyramid scheme, the more we make it complex. Let's get rid of that thing and let's simplify it so that we can actually get our brains back. We'll talk more about that in other podcasts. Management and leadership has been so conflated that we don't even know what the difference is anymore. So let's take a real quick look at these. Leadership is any act that improves the life, situation, or performance of another individual. Any act that improves the life, situation, or performance of another individual. With that definition of leadership, who can lead? Anybody. Anybody can lead under that situation. So therefore, everyone can be a leader because everyone can do something that improves the life, situation, or performance of another individual, whether it's cleaning out the microwave, or encouraging someone at work, or being a model to someone, or doing inspiring work, or motivating them. We can all be leaders. Management is radically different. I've said this before, management comes from slavery, through serfdom, through the military, into the factory systems where people died, and we decided that that's a good way to run a dental practice. It's not. Management is a bankrupt industrial age idea. We need leadership. We got to get rid of management. It is the number one thing that is keeping us from rehumanizing the dental practice, and we cannot give people their brains back if we are going to manage them. Management is the use of power and authority to command and control for the benefit of the manager or the business itself. The use of power and authority to command and control for the benefit of the manager. You can see the radical difference between leadership, which is any act that improves the life, situation, or performance of another individual, and management, the use of power and authority to command and control for the benefit of the manager. I've got a great cartoon that has a manager sticking his head into an employee's office, and it says, "Don't forget, I need to take credit for your report by 3:30. That's management, and it's dehumanizing. Therefore, nobody needs to be managed. We all need to be led, but none of us need to be told what to do in that context for the benefit of other people. I probably tweet this out once a week. When I meet a manager, I get the sense they are important. When I meet a leader, I get the sense that I am important." Another practice that differentiates participation age dentistry from factory system dentistry is results-based incentives versus time-based salaries. This goes with capitalism versus time-based pay. There are 7 terms of engagement that have to do with incentives. And this is a radical difference here between the participation age and the factory system. If you talk to most people about the word incentives, they immediately think of only money. Money is only one of at least 7 things that motivate people. And all the research says that if you pay someone in the range of something they could get for the same job somewhere else, it falls to the bottom as the least motivating thing that people will use to come or to go. My mantra is money will cause people to leave, but it will never cause them to stay. If you don't pay them enough, they'll leave, but you can't pay them enough to keep them if your culture is bad. Here's the other 6 things. Think of the acronym TERMS, TERMS. There are 7 terms of engagement. You want people engaged? There's 7 ways to do it. Cash is only one of them. TERMS, time. experience in education, recognition in relationships, money, and stuff. Those are the 7. Time, experience in education, recognition in relationships, money, and stuff. An iPad or gamifying work. Those 7 things are incentives. In the factory system model, we use grab bags and other things like that that have nothing to do with performance. We've got to get rid of those things and actually recognize people for doing well. Another practice is the difference between the way we have teams. We have distributed decision-making teams with self-managed adults who hire, who fire, who figure out their goals and objectives and their metrics and manage all those things themselves. Or we have the managed team because the manager is pretty sure those people can't do that. I can't tell you how many times we've seen this happen where a manager left and they didn't replace them, and instead they taught the team how to manage themselves, figured out what it is that they actually needed that the manager used to do, spread that amongst the team members, and made it work. We've got a whole podcast on that idea of distributed decision-making teams and how to do that so that you can free your office manager to become an office leader and work at a much higher level. Another practice, functions versus departments. This goes with the idea of being mission-centered. We don't need a front office department. We need a front office function. We don't need a hygiene department. We need a hygiene function. We need a technology function. These are all things that exist to serve the mission. These are functions that exist to serve the mission, and we will get them done no matter what it takes. And we will use whoever we need to in order to get that done as long as everybody agrees. So we don't have boundaries. We don't have fiefdoms. We're not building this thing that somebody owns that justifies their existence as a manager. We are simply putting functions together and asking ourselves, will this function help us deliver for the mission statement? Another practice of the participation age is roles and responsibilities versus jobs and tasks. Roles and responsibilities create ownership. Jobs and tasks make us feel used. Put this nut on that bolt. These rote things where there's no decision making involved cause us to check out. Don't tell me to put a nut on a bolt. Invite me to help make a great washing machine. So I have a function in pursuit of that mission statement of building a great washing machine that will help other people do things. Invite your people to not just do their front desk duty, but to actually serve the patient throughout the whole process and help them understand that their piece of this is simply one piece of the function of getting it all done, that their job is not to answer the phone. Their role and their responsibility is to serve the mission statement and to serve the patient in doing that. When you bring it to that level, people take ownership. The participation age dentistry model also is full of maps of processes and metrics, agreed upon results, self-motivated processes. And in the factory system model, too often it's in the manager's head. It's imposed results that they don't ask anybody what the results are supposed to be. They just impose them, or they don't even tell people. And it's enforced processes. We want people to actually take ownership. Remember, input equals ownership. If the front desk is supposed to run the process, they should have significant input into how that process gets put together. And they should have the final say as to how it works out. Not by themselves, but in collaboration with strategic leadership. So maps of the processes and metrics to define where we're going versus managers is another practice. In the participation age, we should think about 8 through 10 highest common denominator performance versus 3 through 8 lowest common denominator performance. I think most practices and most companies in America operate on a scale of 1 to 10. They operate 3 through 8. They've got people who are 3s who they will probably fire in the next 6 months. And they got 4s that they kind of hope they leave, and if they don't, they'll fire them in a year. And they got 5s that, well, what are you going to do? Everybody's got a 5. And then they got a 6, they feel lucky. They got a few 7s, aren't we fortunate? And they have an 8, they think there's a rock star, and they wish that they could figure out how to keep them. I'm going to suggest to you that in the participation age, 7.9 is a 4-alarm fire. 7.9 is a 4-alarm fire. Everybody should be functioning at an 8 or above. That doesn't mean everybody brings in the same production or any of that kind of stuff. It means that we all bring everything to work every day. 8 through 10, highest common denominator performance versus 3 through 8, lowest common denominator performance. We'll talk a lot more about that in a podcast about LCD management versus HCD leadership. Participation in dentistry is about reverse hiring. We hire just the opposite. from the traditional hiring process. In traditional hiring, we hire first for education and experience, and then for skills that are written on a piece of paper. Now, I understand if you're hiring a doctor, there's no question you have to look at the resume and see what the education is. But too often, for many of the other positions, we're doing the same thing when we should be hiring for beliefs, values, and culture first, demonstrated skills, not skills on a piece of paper. We call those resumes obituaries because it's news about what people used to do, and it might be embellished. They might even actually believe it, and it still may not be true. We want to see beliefs, values, culture, emotional intelligence, empathy, talents, demonstrated skills, and then we might look at experience and education last. Reverse hiring is one of the most important things you'll ever learn, and we've got a great podcast we're putting together on that as well. Stay tuned on that. Full transparency is another practice of participation age dentistry. This is a principle, and the research on this is emphatic. Every company in the world, the more transparent they are with their budgeting, with their losses, their gains, their salaries, their departmental issues, their struggles, the more transparent they are, the more engaged people become in helping solve those problems. Input equals ownership. In the factory system model, we're taught secrecy and unknowns. You're not supposed to know anything except what you're supposed to know personally. And there's a sense of detachment that comes from that takes me away from being involved in the practice. So we'll talk about transparent leadership in another podcast as well. In the participation age, we talk about opportunity, not promotions. I control my destiny. In our business, we had one woman come in at $36,000 a year, and within 13 months, every month she got a raise. In 13 months, she was making 60+ thousand. And it's because she kept adding value. Why would we give somebody a 2.7% pay raise once a year, just like the other guy, or maybe the other guy worked half as hard, so we gave him a 2.5% pay raise? It's dumb, but it's a factory system model. So we'll talk more about that. We have a podcast as well about the whole idea of why you should pay people more and when you should pay people more than the average. But let's give people opportunities to say, you control your destiny. I have one client who walks around the practice and says, Sally, you deserve a raise, and I want to give it to you. Now go find it. I love that. It's a results-based world. If you can show me where you're saving us money, making us money, taking on more responsibilities, I will pay you more. But I'm not going to pay you more because you sat in the chair another 6 months. That is a time-based world, and it's not going to happen. So that's the 11 practices of the participation age. A quick review, distributed decision-making. As we end this, I'll give you one of the examples of one of the more famous models of this in business. Semco is a company that makes washing machines and meat slicers. They also do high technology stuff, banking, all sorts of things. They have, I think, 3,000 people. It's a $1 billion+ private organization. And the guy who started it, Ricardo Semler, said, I didn't create a participation age company to get freedom from the time clock and the bureaucracy and those kinds of things. He said he did it so that everyone who worked there could find their own personal destiny. Now that sounds like a load of woo-woo crap, but we've done the same thing in our business. Every year we have people come together and every single one of us shares what we want to be doing and how our life looks business-wise 1, 3, or 5 years from now. And we strongly encourage people that if they don't want to be here 5 years from now, 3 years from now, 1 year from now, tell us, and we will help you. While you're here, we will help you get there. And we've done that with people. Someone wanted to start their own business. 3 years from now, we had her out in a year and a half doing a business that was largely competitive to us, and we fed her clients as well. And I can tell you she's really loyal, and we've gotten lots of clients back as a result. Give people the opportunity to find their own personal destiny through your work. So this sounds like a bunch of nonsense. Well, how did this work out for Semco? In the worst recession since the Great Depression, their revenues grew by 600%, their profits were up 500%, productivity rose 700%, and this is the kicker, for the last 35 years as a participation age employer, their staff turnover has been under 2% per year for 35 years. That is remarkable. But see, when you give people a place where they are rehumanized and they get their brains back, they won't want to go to the next place. We covered all these myths in another podcast, but I'll cover a few of them quickly here. The idea that you can't measure what we're doing. There are more metrics in the participation age. There's leadership everywhere. This is happening in every industry. The growth, profit, productivity, turnover data is better when you get involved in this kind of process rather than the factory system. There are more processes involved. It's more organized. And it really is just taking us back to where we were before the factory system. This is not new. Practices and companies of all sizes are doing this. And there is management, but it's self-management. Distributed decision-making teams manage themselves as a team. And everybody becomes a capitalist. So that's the overview of the radical difference between the factory system dentistry model and participation age dentistry. You can see that there might be some things in there for you to grab. I'd encourage you to ask yourself, what do I do next on this? We've got plan of actions on these kinds of things. What should I do, by when, and who will I get support from as a result of those kinds of things? We've got 12 tools of distributed decision-making as well. I don't have time to go through those today. We do have a quarterly summit. We call it the GOTT Summit, G-O-T-T, Get Off the Treadmill Summit for dentists and their leaders only. And if you're interested in that, go to gottsummit.com. We go through these 12 tools at that GOTT Summit. It was interesting at the last one, we had one of the largest DSOs in America there and a practice with 5 people, and both of them were practicing participation age dentistry, and it was remarkable to see the synergy between the two of them. So what do we do next? Let's make sure we get this right. If this podcast was helpful, please subscribe by computer or by phone, or connect with us at www.gottsummit.com, 2 T's, G-O-T-T summit.com. That stands for Get Off the Treadmill. We have those summits quarterly for dental practitioners only. Or connect with us at www.chuckblakeman.com or email us at grow@cranksetgroup.com. Let's get off that treadmill. Let's get into the participation age. I look forward to seeing you in the next podcast. Thanks.